Okay, I am so excited about this guest. Oh, we were just laughing about some of the stories in her book, and stick around to the end because we probably won't start telling all the stories of her travels, but we're gonna get there. And her memoir had me gripping my seat a few times because I know she's still here with us, but she had some narrow misses. Oh, her travels. Okay, without any further delay, let me formally introduce this week's guest. Today's guest is a lifelong adventurer whose passion for exploration and connecting with people across cultures has taken her around the globe. After achieving top honors like the Girls Guide Gold Cord and competing nationally in synchronized swimming, she earned a nursing degree and embarked on a trailblazing career. She held executive roles at healthcare organizations across Canada and abroad, becoming one of the country's first female hospital CEOs, but the call of the world remained. Her journey began in her youth when a set of books called Lands and People sparked her imagination about visiting distant nations. In her late 50s, she resigned from her job, put her treasures in storage, and pursued her travel dreams full time. Her solo exploits spanned 23 years, 187 countries and territories, and all 7 continents. Her adventures included tracking gorillas in Uganda, deep sea diving, and climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. She worked for the World Health Organization and the United Nations and co founded the Panama Hospice and Respite Foundation. Now, at 87, she has captured her remarkable life story in her book, Ants in My Pants: One Woman's Unexpected Adventures Across 7 Continents. Her adventures were fueled by an insatiable curiosity about humanity, the beauty, diversity, and personal connections that come from opening ourselves to other cultures. She's an author, an inspiring world citizen whose global experiences touch countless lives. Please join me in welcoming Joyce Perrin. Joyce, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's an honor to be on your podcast.
And you're joining us through the magic of technology from the Greater Toronto area. As you know, this show is about building strong connections, but the context is leadership, which you have a lot. So, how did you define leadership early on, and when did you start realizing you had the skills to lead?
Well, leadership for me is kind of divided into three parts. And let's use some analogies. Leadership as a gardener, and then leadership as a conductor, and then leadership as a storyteller. And so if you go back to those three things, let's take the gardener. You're nurturing the growth. You're taking a variety of plants. You have to have many different things. Like if you have one plant, it needs acid soil. And this plant needs basic soil. And so you have to nurture that. And when you're doing the same thing with your people as your leadership, you have to provide them with those kinds of resources and the environment in which to make them grow. And then you cultivate the diversity in your plants, in your garden, because you don't want all of potatoes, or you don't want all of tomatoes, or you don't want all of one. You want variety because that gives you a much better base for your leadership. So, leading is a very diverse culture. And I certainly learned that when I was traveling to different countries. But then you need to prune too as a gardener. And sometimes that's really hard because, nobody likes to move somebody out of a group. But as a leader, you have to make those decisions and you have to address performance issues. And so that's kind of the gardener point. Then let's go to an orchestra conductor. Well, it needs to have harmonizing. You need to have all the teams working together. You can't have the violins doing something and the bass over here doing something else to make them work. Think of that as leadership. You have to take your diverse teams and ensure that everybody is working together at the same tempo. That's the second part of the orchestra, the tempo. because setting the pace and tone is really important for your projects, because you can't have one team going so fast they're way up ahead and the other team's at the bottom of the hill. So you've got to bring them back. Everybody's got to work together because you've got to move efficiently along the way. But then you have expression as you're an orchestra. You know, you have some loud sounds and you have some small sounds, and you have the in between. But the leader says, come on, I need to hear you some more. And then in others, he goes like that. No, you've got to be quiet. Let them have their turn. So that, and then the last part, as a storyteller, well, as a book writer, this one is the one I like the best because it's crafting the narrative. The storyteller weaves the stories in among everything, and you have to keep this person's role over here, but they can't overtake, so you have to bring them in the story. Then you have to engage the audience. So are you going to make them laugh? Are you going to make them cry? What are you going to do? But you have to be inspiring and motivating through the effective communication. You know, empathy is a really good thing that you need to have as a leader, but connection. And then, of course, you have to adapt the plot because the leader has to remain flexible because you never know what's going to happen. So you can have to change that as you go along. But you need the team to work together. So that's the way you close your finger, you have them work as a team, and that's your job as a leader. So that's what I think about leadership.
Joyce, I've been interviewing people for this podcast since 2015. That has been my first question all these years. I love when I'm surprised by an answer. That was an incredibly thorough response to this very general question of what is leadership and what does it mean to you. I love these analogies, which shows you are a great storyteller yourself. So I won't forget what you're talking about with the gardener and the orchestra conductor, and then of course the storyteller. And it beautifully illustrates that there are different aspects or facets of leadership that we might be good at one part and not always great at another. So when did you start to realize you had some of these leadership attributes? Did it start to kind of come together for you?
Well, it really happened. I was at the lake one summer and I had just taken my teaching certificate in swimming. And so I thought, I didn't have much to do. Some of my friends weren't coming that summer at that time in that week. And I said to my grandmother, I said, Gran, what do you think? I've got some time on my hands. What if I taught swimming to the people in the beach? And there were probably 100 cottages, no, probably about 50 cottages. And so I said, you know, I could go around and I could offer 3 classes. I could offer the beginner class, then I can offer an intermediate class, and then I'll offer a seniors class. And the seniors are that's the hardest group. I said, you know, I think to get to come to my class once a day for a week, well, let's give it a try. So I went knocking on the doors and I explained the situation and I signed up all the people. And of course, the mothers were happy to have the younger people come. The intermediates, they were curious because they wanted to learn some more skills. But the seniors, they took a little bit of persuasion. I said, well, look, you're going to learn life saving. We're going to do some canoe fights, which is when you take a canoe, 2 canoes, and they stand on the gunnels, and you have these poles with a bag on the end, and you try to get the other person off. We're going to learn some diving. We're going to learn some maybe new strokes that you don't know. So everybody had a great time. So the following, at the end of the week on the Saturday, after all the classes, we had a big community performance and all the classes did their piece. And I had one child in my beginning class. She was about 6 years old and she was what we called a thalidomide baby. And that's a child who, during birth, didn't form their arm because of this medication that they took. It was very, very sad. And one of the girls had lost her arm from her elbow. And so I said to her mother, I said, look, let me give her some little extra classes privately so I can get her up to speed because she can do it, but I need to encourage her first. So I spent a little time with her, and she was very successful. She was right up there with the end. And the thing about that little girl, after that, oh, they gave me two suitcases because my mother had told them Joyce Joyce wants to travel. So there I was. And so that was the group they got together and they bought me that. So it was really nice because it meant that somebody had to go into the city to buy them and bring them out because there were no stores like that where we were. Anyway, getting back to my little girl, the mother came up to me and said, those lessons, when I saw her swim, I realized that she could do the things that every other child could do. And I've been protecting her. And it was like I was nursing this cocoon and I just let her build her wings and fly away. And even now that just touches my life. So I kept in touch with that child, and she really did extremely well. So it was one little thing that I did that really helped her along.
Were you a teenager at the time?
I was a teenager. I was in high school.
Yeah.
I was the last year of high school.
So, you clearly had already, before that moment, developed some leadership because you had sought out to get certified to teach swim. And I remember from doing some research on you, in your intro, we talked about you doing the high honors and I know I messed the name up a little bit. Let's see, it's called the Girl Guides.
Yes, the
So
Girl Guides.
here in the States, we have Girl Scouts.
Right.
So
Same.
it's similar to that. And you rose the highest rank for that, which means you really stuck with the program. Were you sort of a leader in school when you were on the playground? Were you getting friends together? Are you kind of quiet? Were you more like academically focused, sports focused? Where did you show up when you were really young on those early playground, elementary school years?
Well, in the elementary years, it took me a long time. It was because I was away and I didn't get into first grade until I think October. So I had missed that first month, and it took me quite a while to catch up. But by the time I got to high school, I was active and I was selected as the head cheerleader. So that gave me a lot of boost. And then I was on committees, organizing committees. But where I learned my organization was through my guide leader, Peggy Martin. And she taught me everything about leadership that I learned. And I really must say that she nurtured my curiosity because I was always so curious. So I took the Girl Guide book and it had all these different badges you could get. And I started at the beginning and I said, okay, which ones well, I wanted to do astrology. So I had to find the professor at the university. I had to go over to the planetarium and see myself. And then I had to pass his test. And then I got this little badge that I put on my arm. And the funny thing is when I went to the Girl Guide camp in Sweden, we had to wear our guide uniform. And my arms were just covered with badges because of curiosity. I loved it. I would take all my I would take all my students and we'd go to the bread factory and then we'd go to the milk factory and we'd go to the museum. And here I'd be with my little troop along because I was the one that was curious. I wanted to learn all these things. But anyway, my badges were always there. So we had to wear our uniform. And as we were going, wherever we took a picture, the man said, "You come over here so I can see all those badges. Put your arm on the desk like this." It was really funny. It never really occurred to me because it wasn't the badge that was important. It was the information that I loved.
Joyce, I'm not surprised to hear this because it feels like that curiosity about how life works really follows you your whole life. I mean, it shows up. I just finished reading your memoir about your travels, and clearly curiosity is an underpinning of why you chose to do certain things, your willingness to put yourself in certain situations. I wanted to get a little better understanding of your career trajectory because you gloss over this in the book because the book's not about that. But just a little bit you say is like, wait, you what? And I mentioned this briefly in the intro, first female CEO of a hospital in Canada, not a small feat. We have to sort of contextually put the timing here. Um, when you're in your 20s, you're in like the post school age. What year is that? Like, I'm just trying to give people a context here. So,
1959.
okay,
That's when I graduated from university.
so you
And in
so it's your
university,
60s when you're really like young adult. You're a young adult in the 60s, and change is happening, but not quickly enough. And you're on the forefront of a lot of this, being, I'm imagining, the only woman in a lot of situations because you want to keep learning. Did you find that to be true as you kept sort of seeking out new opportunities?
well, yes and no. But what happened after I got married, I worked 1 year in Hamilton, and then my husband went to Harvard Business School. So when he graduated, I got a little certificate that said putting hubby through, which was true. And then we moved quite a bit. So at that time, I was really out of the workforce. I did consulting. Well, I didn't do consulting. I'd work on the weekends in the being the senior person in the hospital, that sort of thing, because I did that as I was working along the way. And then I had 3 children. So I was out of, and they were very close together. So I was very busy. I just was out of the workforce at that time. And then we moved back to Canada. And after my children were all in school, that's when I went back and got a master's in health administration. And I was the only, well, there was one other older woman in the class, but I was the only one. She was retiring and she just wanted this for her. She wasn't going to work afterwards, but she just wanted it. But I was then competing with all these young guys in the class. It was tough.
So you're
It
like
was tough.
in your 30s at that point?
I'm in my 30s, yes, late
So
30s.
my gosh, I will tell you that when I was an undergrad, I took some classes that were 6 to 9 o'clock at night because I'm not an early morning person. And I quickly learned that that's when all the people who work during the day take classes and they're paying their way through school and they're taking it very seriously. So it was much harder, the curve, to try to get ahead in those classes compared to the classes in the middle of the day with all the first and second year students who aren't taking it quite so seriously because mom and dad are paying for it. So, but to be in those spaces as an older student, it's not easy to do. But you were pretty determined. And what was it you were seeking to do? Like, how did you end up in nursing and hospital stuff? Like, how did you even know that that was your interest?
Well, I decided that I really wanted to be the leader of a hospital. And so that's what I had to do. I had to take this course and I was an award winner in the first part of the class. I didn't get the award for the last, but I was runner up. But anyway, um, the thing was that I loved learning. I just love learning. So and you know, I that's just it. I love learning.
I
But
here's
I was juggling 3 kids at school
Yeah.
as they were going through their school and going to classes, and my husband was traveling all the time. So it was difficult. There was no question about that.
Yeah, it sounds very challenging. A moment ago, you said you decided to go for this master's degree because you knew you wanted to run a hospital. That's a big statement. Like, what led you to think I not only like I know I can do this, I know I could do a better job than what's being done, and now I'm gonna go get the experience and the degree to let me do it. Like, you've been out of the workforce for the most part for all this time, but when you come back with a plan to go big. What's behind that?
Well, um, because I wanted to be more creative. I wanted to, I've been in the hospitals. I wanted to learn I wanted to learn my skills well so that if I ever made it to the top, I would be able to manage a hospital well. But, you know, um, it's funny how things go. So we had moved back to Canada and I didn't have any connections in the classes. I was new to the scene. So it took a while to be able to do that.
Mhm.
But I was just so interested in helping the healthcare system that that's that's what I did.
So how old are you when you achieved your big dream of being the head of a hospital?
Mm. Oh, I don't even know. I guess it was in my late 40s, 50s. Yeah, I don't even remember.
S This is just really interesting because, you basically started yourself on a very serious path in your early 30s, super challenging time, juggling 3 kids, spouse that's traveling, you're taking classes, with a dream that is more than 10 years in the making. That's almost like a so you if it's like early 30s to late 40s or early 50s, you're talking about a 15 to 20-year view of what you were willing to work towards. And I just want to call that out because sometimes people expect change to happen really fast. There's that whole joke
Oh,
about
yeah.
being an overnight success 10 years in the making. For you, it was more like 20 years in the making that you were like, I declare I want this to happen. And then it happened. And so in your 50s, you got to be the head of a hospital, but you did something very unusual for even today, but particularly unusual, I think, for that time. In your late 50s, you decided to pursue travel, which I know is the focus of your memoir is this topic. Another really big decision. It's like you achieved your big goal career wise. You did it for a period of time and then you thought, I still have this itch to scratch around travel. I'm going to go put things in storage. So, you're what, 57 when you start thinking that?
Yeah,
That
57 when I left
yeah.
and went to Saudi Arabia, and I worked there for 3 years. Now, why did I do that? Because by that time I was divorced, and I wanted to put some money in the bank, and I knew people who had worked in Saudi Arabia. One of the doctors said, "You need to go there. That would be the place for you." So I applied, and the first job, which would have been really fantastic, they offered me the job, but then the next day they cut all hires for the period of time. And so I took another job, but I had to wait a while. So I waited till while I was waiting, I took a cruise around South America.
I know, I love this. Like you're talking about how you're getting information from telegrams. the whole book was like almost like thinking about the patience that back then you didn't think of as patience, because now we're digitally connected, right? Like everything's
Yeah.
instant. And then you're like, so I had, not only did you wait for a telegram, but the telegram was delivered to you at dinner time. Do you know what I mean? Like
On this cruise ship.
on the cruise ship, like there was a moment, like you would have to wait in anticipation. How did you have the funds set aside to even start this? Had you been sort of planning this and like squirreling some money away, knowing you were gonna want to go on a big trip at some point?
Right, and I decided, well, this is my
Mhm.
retirement, cruise, and I thought, "Well, what am I going to do waiting?" Well, of course, I wanna travel, so go do it and go take a trip around South America.
Right, like, why not? So how old were
Yes,
your kids when you're in your late 50s? Are they young
they were
adults?
all married. All my children were married before I left Canada. They were all married.
So are they in their
So,
20s and married?
I
You don't know.
can't remember. I can't remember,
But
but they
they're
were
but
all
they're
married.
established human beings.
But
They're
they
established.
all had graduated from university,
Yep.
and my daughter, who was the youngest, had graduated, from med school, and so she had finished that, and so she graduated,
So
and
they're in
I
their 30s.
resigned,
Yeah.
and then away they went.
Wow.
So,
Okay, so complete empty nest. They're off to building their own nests.
yeah.
They're in their 30s. They're establishing their own lives. You're thinking, this is my moment to do it. You had good health. You never know how long we're going to have good health. There's a book I was just reading called Die with Zero, which I thought about a lot while I was reading your book, because I'd read them almost in tandem. And Die with Zero is like not putting things off, plan for your future, do the life insurance, do the long-term care planning. But then, when is the right time to travel is not like in your late 70s. Is not the easier time. Do it when you can, which is why you went and
Mhm.
did it. Um, there were so many risks you took. This book, Ants in My Pants. We will put a link in the show notes. I have to just tell you, reading this book, and I don't read a lot of memoirs, but now I'm wondering whether I'm missing out on a whole genre, particularly with good writing. And you have excellent storytelling. You have all these like big decisions about where you're going to go and saying yes to things and different opportunities, and you're volunteer here and you're working for WHO and you're working for the United Nations. Like, you use your time so well and you built on everything you had done up to that point. And yet it felt like you were constantly just saying, well, let's see, what are the 2 or 3 options in front of me? I'll pick this one. And the fact that you had to plan, like, even, oh, I don't know how you remembered like the name of the airline, which probably doesn't even exist anymore, and how tickets had to be issued by hand, or like all these little details, like how in the 70s flight was still really new. It's such a time warp to think about how hard it was to get a visa, to get information, to research a locale. I mean, good thing you like to to be curious and learn. What was challenging? I mean, nowadays you have all these resources at your fingertips, but when you were like, I'm thinking about going to Saudi Arabia, I know one person, I know, like, how do you prepare to get yourself into another culture? Like, what were some of the steps you took?
Well, first of all, I talked to the people who had been there. And one of the doctors had just been there. So we talked about that. And I, when you apply there, they told you different things, but you never know. But having a person who's been there is really helpful. But um, going back to traveling, when we did the Pacific Rim with the family, that we had, there was no internet, there was nothing. You did paper tickets. The kids had little books. The pilots would sign for them, and this sort of thing was really amazing. And then when my son got lost or left me, and this was amazing. We were at the what they call the Sing Sing in Papua New Guinea, and there were thousands of natives there, or indigenous people, and they were showing all their spears and everything, and he disappeared. And then when I found him in the police department, he didn't want me to take him away because he was having a great time with the policeman.
Yeah.
He no, he said, "This isn't my mother." So,
How did you have I mean, obviously, that was a particularly, trying moment. Maybe that was held in your head, but, were you just always a journaler? Because you only mention your journal once or twice the whole book,
oh,
but
oh,
clearly
oh, clearly, I wrote every night. I wrote every night. So what's in the book is what I had in my diary. And I don't know, I never thought about writing about it when I started, even though I had written professional journal articles. So I did have that in my mind. But when I started my journey, I just liked to share my stories, and I shared them with my mother, who at that time was in her 90s, and so she she kept them for me. And when I was at the hospital, I could use a typewriter, and I could fax them to it. So that's when I had the stories. But then I've got all little notebooks that have every day, there's something about it. And because I was so curious, I I wrote good notes. And with that I was able to, and this is something that many people ask me, how did you keep your information?
I mean, there
Yeah.
are descriptions of people and their facial hair and their complexion and what their clothing looked like and how tall they were. I mean, there's just detail. It's vivid storytelling where I feel like I'm standing in this space, and it is amazing how much you were able to capture the tone as well as the visual experience of being in these places, and to have captured that in a way that you could then pull it back and share it with us 30 years later. I mean, it's really remarkable. I have a question that probably you've been asked before, but you put your treasures, as you call them, in storage at age 57, and at age 80 took them out of storage. So 23 years later, what did you find?
Well, I found my crystal, I found my silver, I found the things that I enjoyed in my home, and I found most of those things. But then I had to give some of those things away because I moved from, you know, I had sold all my furniture and all that sort of thing. And and so when I opened the boxes, it was fun. It was really
I mean,
fun.
it's like a, when people, what is it called when you put things in the ground and then open it
Oh,
100 years later?
yeah,
A time
yeah,
capsule. It's like
right.
a time capsule. I was imagining at 57, because you didn't know you were gonna truly be gone for all
No,
those
I
years,
didn't.
right? You
I
could have put
didn't.
away a TV. You could have been like, "Let's just put this
No,
TV here and this
no, no,
radio."
no. I had no furniture, nothing. I just had china
Uh-huh.
and
So actual treasures like
tray
china, crystal,
so
silver,
or that
heirloom
sort of thing,
heirloom
heirloom
pieces.
things. And then fortunately, I sent parcels home when I was traveling. Like after I left Saudi Arabia, I sent all my photos home, and I would send them home, or I'd send them to my daughter. Actually, that's where they would go, or to my son in Canada. So one of them got it. So they were keeping boxes for me as I went along. And then when I left Saudi Arabia, I sent my baskets and different things that were in pictures, what were in the book.
That's the thing, when you were traveling, you were going to the market in all these countries and you were buying little and sometimes big things that then had to make it back home to to Canada and stored somewhere. So you end up with a treasure trove from your travel, and it's worth getting the book so people can see all of this. One other thing I have to note is all of your close calls. I want to preface this by saying that this book gave me so many feels. I mean, like so many. I was saying this to my wife. I'm turning 50 this year, and I'm like, yes, I want to travel more. Traveling sounds like a good idea. And then I read your book, and I'm like, oh, not that kind of traveling. I love reading. I'm not, nope, I don't like fish that much. I don't like camping that much. I don't like outdoors that much. Oh, I don't think I want to ride those rapid. Like the whole time I was like, I think I'm a wimp when it comes to, I said to my wife, I said, my idea of traveling is like the safe little tour, and she's laughing at me because it's so true. But yet I'm immersed in your zeal for life and the conditions you put yourself in. What was the scariest? You had a lot of close moments where you were like, death was on the horizon there. How like, which one is memorable as a really close call?
Well, I must tell you before I say anything, I have this vision when I was traveling that I have 6 guardian angels. No, 8. 2 in front, 2 beside. Oh, 2 beside. That makes 8. No, 2, 4, 6. Yeah, 8. 8 guardian angels. So whenever I was feeling this, I would call on my guardian angels. I would say, guardian angels, you've got to do something. And the scariest time was when I was in the taxi, and that really was the scariest time.
When the
I
guy
was
basically
in,
saw you as a victim and was
yes,
going to try to do some horrible things to you.
right, exactly.
Mm.
And at that time, um, it's funny. People said, "Well, why did you take that taxi?" Well, in Yemen, it's not quite that easy. So I went to where the lady was doing the taxis, and I just trusted her to get me a taxi that everybody was. So it was that was the only way to do things. But in the middle of the trip, we were going back from this um, kind of a reception area. And then from there, we had to go down a road and then back to my hotel. And and so I had told the hotel person where I was going, but usually I had a WHO driver, but not in the evening when I was going out myself. So I had checked around and people said, oh, yeah, it's phased, no problem. So I was going, but then when got in the car, he said to me, well, come and sit in the front seat. I said, no, I'm tired. I'll sit in the back. But often I would sit in the front seat, but I just said no. And I was tired because I was planning the next day, and we were leaving this city, and then we were going to Sanaa. So it was going to be an early day, and it was going to be a long drive, and that wasn't going to be so easy. So I sat, and if you're in a taxi, there's one place in the taxi which is way over to the, like, if the driver's sitting on the left hand side, you sit way over on the left, and he cannot see you in the mirror unless he turns his mirror. So I don't know. I kind of thought, why did he want me to sit in the front seat? So I said no, and I sat there, and I'd sit back to the side. And then I got this awful feeling. So I said, come on, guardian angels, I need you. I need you right here. And so he slowed down, and it wasn't the way we came, and it was dark, and the road was isolated. There were no cars, no houses, no nothing. So I came along, and I just prayed. I said, guardian angels, I need you right here. So we got home. Everything was fine. I got in. And as I was opening the door, he said to me, "This is just, it was just awful. It was awful." He said, "Oh, I always wanted to do it to a white person." And so that I thought, oh, so I walked in the door and I was all pale and everything. And the guy said, "Joyce, you look terrible. What's happening? Are you okay? Do I need to get a doctor?" I said, "No, I'll be fine." And just went home and went up to my room. But
Gosh,
that was a really close, that was the only time I was really afraid.
I mean, what's amazing is right now in this cultural moment that we're recording this, there's this debate about who do you want to run into the woods you want to run into a bear or a man? And considering that you were in shark infested water with very close calls, and lots of other like dangerous, physically dangerous, nature related spaces. But when I asked you, like, when did you truly feel afraid for your life? It's a man-made moment. Like, it's just hard to not
Yeah.
miss this. And I'm so glad you were safe, but it does bring to mind the fact that you were this single white Canadian in the foreign world. You also tell a story about you went somewhere to learn their culture and to spend time with the sisters, cooking and cleaning. And the man of the house was very abrupt and just, your understanding of like the rules, right? Like, oh, the women have to be a certain way and only the men get this thing. And just the hardship that you were witnessing and that you were willing to put yourself in spaces of hardship, and you were trying to walk this line of appreciating cultural differences while also feeling like, is this the way women should be treated? Like it's such a you're not a distant archaeologist thinking about a time a long time ago. You're a sociologist. You were in it, right? So
Right.
how did you walk that line of respecting the differences while also wanting to better women's lives, because you were really witness in many situations to just how hard these women had it, and it was sort of relentless, their lives. And a lot of it was like they didn't have access to things like easy drinking water or cleaning facilities, and just like their everyday chores to keep the life going, the household running, was a full-time job on top of the raising the kids and all the rest. How did you balance being respectful and also wanting to like witness change?
Well, that was one of my most meaningful experiences I've ever had in my travels when I stayed with the family in Zimbabwe. And um, the morning I was to leave, um, the man of the house talked to me. We had a very, very good conversation. And he said, "Well, you're the first woman I've had come and stay with my house. It's been men." And of course, I was traveling solo. So is the difference. And he said, "I now understand." And so when I left the family there, I went to the store and I bought everything I could possibly buy. I bought a big, they only had one, but I would have bought three big fry pans. I would have bought three big pots. I would have bought everything, but the store didn't have any supplies. It was just terrible. So I bought what I could and I bought all their books and all their note paper and all their pencils, because when I was helping the little girl with her, um, uh,
Algebra.
what was it, calculus? No,
Algebra.
algebra. Had to write on the bottom of a piece of paper that was no more than maybe
Oh,
an inch,
right.
or
You were
three
using the
quarters.
margins of a newspaper to
To
write because you didn't
Because
have blank paper.
yeah, I had to test out my algebra because I hadn't done algebra for so many years. So I had to use a formula that I knew the answer so I would be able to figure it out. But I mean, she had one textbook for the whole class, and this
Yes,
was her
she
night.
said to you, "Tonight's the night I get to bring the textbook home. Will you help me with the homework?" I
Yeah,
mean, it's heartbreaking how little people have, and I wanna say
yeah,
currently have. It's not like a past tense because I think there are still these conditions
I
in
think
certain
so
parts of the
too.
world. And that's part of it. I think the empathy that we get for people in the world from reading a book like this, your willingness to again really embed yourself in a family. And you did say in the book that some of your best experiences were getting a chance to live with different families, hanging out with children. I caught one line when you said all children until the age of 2 are the same, but 3 on, they start to have cultural nuances and cultural differences. I thought that was a very interesting insight
Yeah.
about where kids sort of learn and pick up things. But it's a fascinating book, and we'll definitely have a link to it in the show notes. But I want to make sure we take a couple of minutes to talk about just how you've stayed in touch with people, because even throughout the book, you mentioned circling back to some people, seeing people in other parts of the world, like meeting in one place, then reconnecting back in the maybe in their homeland. And you were really good at sort of keeping the network close to you and relying on your network to get yourself in and out of different places and in and out of different jams and trying to find new opportunities. What's your sort of secret sauce for that? How are you like applying any philosophies or practices or habits to nurture your extended network?
Well, to this day, I'm still meeting people. There is no, there's a husband from a girl from the Girl Guide camp, but other than that, all the other people have already died. But when I climbed Kilimanjaro, I still keep in touch with the other two ladies that were there, and and I love people. I love talking to people. I just enjoy it. Like whenever I'm traveling, the person sitting next to me, we have a chat. I talk with a person. He introduced me to his wife. His wife has a wonderful program. That's just the way it works. And I love keeping in touch. I have a long list of people. I send out emails. I send birthday greetings. I send greetings at Memorial Day or on Easter and Christmas and this sort of thing. And I love to keep their birthdays and that sort of thing. And as my numbers are growing, it's great. I feel really good. But I love talking to people, and so when I do that, a smile is a smile in any language. If you smile with your eyes, and I really learned the difference of a smile, of a real smile with your eyes. And I learned a lot about body language and about people. And I wouldn't change anything in my life. I was so lucky. I've got 12 grandchildren now.
That's amazing.
It is amazing. And I just, I've got some weddings coming up next year. So I've got to be really healthy because at 8, my gosh, 80, my health kind of changed and I'm struggling a bit with that. But
Yeah,
I can
you
still do
mentioned
it.
in the book, you talked about your mother going there's 2 trips you talked about your mother taking at 90 and at 95. The fact that she was well enough to travel long distances, it is truly remarkable. So you come from good stock, and I hope your health does continue to improve because you clearly had a strong base for getting started. You were in your 60s and 70s and keeping up with other people on these long treks. The whole thing is remarkable. I would love to know, this is the question I always wrap up with. So before we get to my favorite wrap up question, a quick word from our sponsor. Okay, so I have the good fortune of staying in touch with you, Joyce. You are part of the Content and Connection Club. So this is a group that meets weekly for a mastermind. We also have co-working sessions and a monthly book club, monthly business book club. And I have really enjoyed getting to know you through the Content and Connection Club. And I'll put a link in the show notes, contentandconnectionclub.com. Folks want to check it out. There's a 7-day guest pass to hang out with amazing people like Joyce. So a year from now, if I were to say to you, hey, Joyce, it's been about a year since I interviewed you, I'm going to want to ask you, what should we be celebrating from this past year? So another way of saying this is, what are you most looking forward to in the year ahead?
Oh, I want to share my story with more people. I want to do more speaking. I really have decided that's what I want to do because I love meeting people and I love sharing my story. And that's my focus for the next few years.
That's great. I hope that anyone listening who has the opportunity to bring a speaker in, an inspiring speaker who's got, I mean, your career story alone is worthy of being heard, but then everything you've done from your late 50s, you spent 23 years roaming the world. And again, not in a surfacey kind of way, in a really deeply connecting with local connections and cultures. You've got a zillion stories to share. You're an amazing book, Answer My Pants, for people to check out. How else can people find you and follow your work?
They can follow me on my website and in LinkedIn, and I have a Facebook page.
Fantastic. So joyceperrin.com. We're also going to put your LinkedIn link and we'll put your book link also. They'll all be in the show notes at ontheschmooze.com. Joyce, thank you so much for joining us. This has been an amazing conversation.
Well, thank you. I appreciate being here, and I just love our network. And it's wonderful to see you every Friday. So I'll see you tomorrow.